The dish towel was still damp in my hand when Vanessa's phone lit up on my kitchen counter, 3 feet from where I stood. I wasn't trying to see it. I was reaching past it for the gravy boat, the one Frank always said I filled too full, and the screen caught my eye the way headlights catch a deer's. Frank's photo. Not the gray silhouette icon that comes standard on every phone. Not a stock image pulled from somewhere online. A real photograph of my husband, the one taken on the porch the summer before he got sick, his glasses pushed up on his head, laughing at something just out of frame. I know that photograph. I took that photograph. I never sent that photograph to my daughter-in-law. Under his name, a message preview sat glowing on the lock screen, cut off after a handful of words, the way they always are. Transfer confirmed. Don't tell. That was all I got. 4 words, maybe 5, before the screen dimmed itself back to black like it had said too much already. I stood there with the towel in my hand, my thumb pressed against nothing, just the space where an explanation should have been. 8 months. Frank had been gone 8 months, and somehow his face was still lighting up in another woman's pocket, attached to a name that had no reason to send him anything at all. I set the towel down carefully and did not touch that phone. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is for women who've been counted out, talked over, or told they wouldn't understand, and who found out they understood everything all along. If that's a story you know, or one you need to hear tonight, stay with me and subscribe. There are a lot more women like us on this channel and a lot more proof. I'm 67 years old, and for 31 years, before I ever touched a wooden spoon in this kitchen with anything resembling retirement in mind, I was a forensic accountant for a regional bank. Not the kind of accountant who balances checkbooks and calls it a day. My job was to sit with a stack of wire transfers and find the one that didn't belong, the one authorization that had been copied a fraction too cleanly, the signature that curved wrong at the tail end of a letter because the person signing it had never actually held that pen before. I retired in 2019 on a Friday in March, and they gave me a sheet cake and a card signed by people who still call me for advice sometimes, which tells you something about how thoroughly that work stayed in my hands even after I walked out the door for the last time. I testified in 3 embezzlement cases over the years. I sat in rooms with lawyers who wanted plain language, not jargon, and I gave it to them, because a jury doesn't convict on a phrase like irregular disbursement pattern. They convict on the moment you show them 2 signatures side by side and let them see it themselves. I trained junior auditors how to look at a stack of documents the way I did. Not reading them exactly but listening to them the way you'd notice if a familiar song came in half a beat off. Frank used to tease me about it. He called it my bank face, the look I'd get scanning our own mail before I'd even taken my coat off. He handled the big things in our marriage, the trust, the property, the conversations with our lawyer in Ohio he'd known since college. I let him have that. It made him feel useful in the years his knees wouldn't let him do the things he used to do around the house. And I never once told him I still read every statement that came through our mailbox every single month the way another woman might check the mail for a magazine she liked. It wasn't suspicion. I want to be clear about that. It was habit, the same way some people can't walk past a crooked picture frame without straightening it. 31 years does that to you. It rewires something in the way you look at numbers, at names, at anything with a signature line. I didn't know yet, standing in my kitchen with that towel in my hand, that this habit, this small, quiet, unglamorous habit of mine, was about to become the only thing standing between my family and a woman who'd counted on nobody ever checking. My son Marcus married Vanessa 6 years ago, in a backyard ceremony with string lights and a borrowed arch, and they gave me a granddaughter 2 years later, a little girl named Josie who still can't say her R's properly and calls me Gamma Atui. From the start, Vanessa took over the household finances, she said, to take the burden off Marcus, who'd never been much good with numbers and didn't pretend otherwise. Seemed like a kindness. Marcus worked long hours at the plant, and someone had to keep the lights on and the bills paid, and Vanessa was organized in a way I respected, even if we were never especially close. Since Frank died, I've hosted Sunday dinner every week without fail. Pot roast, sometimes chicken, always too much of it, the way I've cooked since I had a husband and 2 teenagers to feed instead of just myself. Part of it is habit. Part of it, if I'm honest, is that Sunday dinner is the one guaranteed hour I get with Marcus and Josie, and I wasn't about to lose that on top of everything else I'd already lost that year. Vanessa always came. She'd bring a bottle of wine, ask about my garden, help clear the table without being asked. On the surface, everything about us looked like a family that had simply, quietly, kept going after a hard year. I had no reason, walking into that kitchen most Sundays, to think otherwise. Vanessa came back into the kitchen a few minutes later, looking for her phone, and I handed it to her the way you'd hand someone something ordinary, because I hadn't decided yet what I was going to do with what I'd seen. Marcus had taken Josie out to the yard to see the last of the tomatoes, so it was just the two of us, the dishwasher humming between us like it was trying to fill the silence I wasn't filling. I asked her, as gently as I knew how, why Frank's photo was still saved in her phone. I said I didn't understand why she'd get a text about a transfer under his name 8 months after he'd passed. She laughed first. A short laugh, the kind people use to test whether a question is really a question. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand like she was swatting at something small. "That's just an old label on the account. I never bothered to change it." I asked what account. She got quieter then and busier wiping a counter that didn't need wiping. "Frank set that up before he got sick," she said. "Automatic transfers, for Josie's college fund. I just kept managing it the way he set it up. It's not complicated." I asked, still gently, why the label said "Don't tell." That's when her face changed just slightly, the way a person's does right before they decide to stop being careful. She set the towel down harder than she needed to. "It's really not a big deal, Atlee," she said. "Frank set it up before he got sick. It's not like he's using the money now, is he?" I didn't answer right away. I don't think I could have, even if I'd wanted to. She said it so plainly, so easily, like she was stating a fact about the weather. And I remember thinking that a woman doesn't say a thing like that about a dead man unless some part of her has already decided he doesn't count anymore. Not as a person to answer to. Not as anyone at all. She must have heard how it sounded, because she softened her voice after, said something about being tired, about Josie's bedtime, gathered her things a little too quickly. I told her to drive safe. I always tell her to drive safe. I did not tell her what I was already starting to think. I walked her to the door the way I always did. Thanked her for coming, told Josie to give Gamma one more hug before she buckled into her car seat. I stood on the porch and waved the way I'd waved every Sunday since Frank died. My face arranged into something ordinary, something that wouldn't have told a stranger anything was wrong. I did not accuse her. 31 years of sitting across from people who'd done something wrong taught me exactly what happens the moment you accuse someone before you have proof. They stop talking. They get careful. Whatever trail existed gets cleaned up by morning, and you're left holding a feeling instead of a fact. And a feeling has never once held up in front of a judge. I waited until her taillights turned off my street before I let my hands shake. I stood there a long moment, gripping the porch railing. Frank had rebuilt himself the summer before he retired. And I made myself a promise standing in that spot. I wasn't going to ask her anything else. I was going to find out for myself, the way I'd been trained to, quietly and completely, before I said one more word to anyone. That night, once the house was quiet and Josie's booster seat marks were the only sign anyone had been there at all, I went to the hall closet and pulled down the file box Frank kept his important papers in, the one with the cracked corner he never got around to replacing. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. I wasn't sure honestly that I had the stomach for it. Near the bottom, under insurance documents and old tax returns, I found a folder I didn't remember seeing before. Inside it was a trust amendment, notarized 3 weeks before Frank died. Back when he was already too weak to sit up in a chair for more than 20 minutes at a time. I looked at his signature for a long time. 31 years of my life were spent looking at signatures, and I can tell you that a man's hand changes when he's sick, when he's tired, when he's signing under someone else's watch instead of his own. This signature didn't look tired. It looked practiced. It looked like someone who'd had time to get it right. I kept going. Behind the amendment was a bank statement I'd never seen from an account I didn't recognize, showing a recurring transfer, the same amount, the same date, month after month, to something listed only by 3 letters and the word LLC. I sat on the floor of that closet with the statement in my hands and I said the name out loud just once, just to hear how it sounded in my own kitchen. If you've ever noticed one small detail that turned out to unravel something much bigger. A receipt, a text, a signature that didn't sit right. Tell me about it in the comments below. I'd like to know I'm not the only one this has happened to. In the morning I called Ruth, who I'd worked alongside for 11 years before she retired to Florida, and started sending me photographs of grapefruit trees I never asked for. I read her the LLC name over the phone slowly, the way we used to read numbers to each other across a shared desk. She told me to give her an hour and hung up before I could thank her. While I waited, I did what she'd have told me to do anyway. I pulled up the state's business registry online, typed the name in, and there it was, plain as anything, filed 2 months before Frank died. The registered agent wasn't Frank. It wasn't even Marcus. It was Vanessa, her full legal name printed right there where anyone could look if anyone ever thought to. The address listed for the LLC wasn't her house. I recognized it anyway after a moment because I dropped off a birthday gift there once years ago. It was her sister's apartment complex, the one off Route 9 with the blue awnings. Ruth called back within the hour and confirmed what I already suspected, the way she always used to when we worked cases together. Plainly, without drama, just facts laid out one after another. She also gave me the number for the title company Frank's amendment had gone through, and a suggestion to request the notary's log for that date, which is public record if you ask the right way and are patient about it. That afternoon I called Denise, Josie's godmother, who's been a paralegal for almost as long as Vanessa's been part of this family. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. I asked her in general terms what it would take to challenge a trust amendment after the fact. She walked me through it carefully: medical records, notary verification, proof of capacity at the time of signing, and told me gently that if even half of what I was describing was true, I had more standing than I probably realized. By the following Sunday, I'd already spoken to a lawyer, a sharp young woman named Priya that Denise had recommended, and I sat down to dinner that night with a folder tucked in a drawer in the next room, though nobody at that table knew it existed. Vanessa noticed something different in me anyway. She's not unobservant, whatever else she is. She kept glancing at me across the pot roast, and about halfway through the meal, before I'd even finished serving Josie's plate, she brought up the estate on her own, without me asking a single question. "I've been thinking," she said, in the easy voice she uses when she wants something to sound like it isn't a big deal, "that we should just go ahead and settle everything with Dad's estate. Get the paperwork finalized. It would make things so much easier for everyone, especially with Josie's college fund tied up in the middle of it." Marcus nodded along the way he does with most things Vanessa says at that table, and asked me to just sign what the lawyer sends over whenever it arrives so we could all stop worrying about it. Vanessa added, almost as an afterthought, that there was a deadline coming up on some of the paperwork, something about a filing window closing at the end of the month, and that it would be best if I could sign sooner rather than later. I told her I'd take a look at whatever she sent. I did not tell her I already had a lawyer of my own. The following Sunday, once the plates were cleared and Josie was settled in front of a cartoon in the other room, I brought out the folder and set it on the table between us, calm as I would have set down a serving dish. I laid the amendment out first, then the LLC filing beside it, then the notary log I'd requested through Priya's office. I explained each one plainly, the way I used to explain evidence to juries who needed it in plain language, not jargon. I told them the notary log showed Frank was checked into St. Agnes on the date this amendment claims. He sat across from a notary and signed it. I told them his own hospital chart, which Denise had helped me request, showed him sedated that entire afternoon, incapable of holding a pen steady enough to sign anything at all. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The documents did what documents are built to do, which is simply sit there and be true. Vanessa's face went through several things in quick succession: confusion, then something sharper, then a kind of stillness I hadn't seen from her before. She started to say Frank had told her, back before he got sick, that this was what he wanted, but the words came out thinner than they had at my kitchen counter that first night. Marcus didn't say anything at all. He read the pages himself twice slowly, his jaw working the way it used to when he was a boy and someone had told him something he didn't want to be true. The trust was restored to its original terms within a matter of weeks, Priya handling the paperwork with the same calm precision Ruth used to bring to a stack of wire transfers. Marcus filed for divorce before the month was out, quietly, without the shouting I half expected. Some part of him, I think, had known longer than he let himself admit. I think about Frank often these days the way I always have, but differently now. He kept records of everything: receipts, warranties, letters he probably should have thrown out years ago. I used to tease him about it, called it his squirrel habit, all that paper he couldn't bear to part with. I understand it differently now. That habit, the one I rolled my eyes at for 40 years, turned out to be the very thing that protected this family after he was gone. He always did leave a trail for someone to follow. There's a second account, one I found tucked behind the first, that I still haven't told Marcus about, or opened myself. If you want to know what's inside it, subscribe and I'll tell you what I found.